I'm Graham Ablett. I'm here from Strategic Proposals, and I am very, very, very pleased to introduce you to one of our latest recruits, Gaby.
Hi, Graham.
So I just want to ask you a couple of questions, if I might. So to start with, thinking about your roles leading bid teams across different regions. Could you just talk to us a little about the experiences you've had and maybe some of the learnings that people could take away and think about?
Thank you. So I've led, like you said, I've led UK European bidding teams. I've also coordinated all of the global on a
Mm,
global scale, all of the regional teams. That was when I was at the Royal Bank of Scotland. And
mm,
first of all, cultural understanding, first and foremost. Yes,
mm,
you're dealing with people. It's not just about different geographies or different time zones. It's also different cultural backgrounds. So how they work with their clients locally might not be the same way how you work with your clients
mm.
locally, and it might still be the same client.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
because
same
you're working
logo.
with the same company, it doesn't necessarily, as a client, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone works in the same way. So that first of all, and the other one is, you know, being attuned to what people have to say. The fact that you're leading, in this case, or coordinating a team on a global scale doesn't necessarily mean that someone in Asia or in the US or in Europe or in the UK knows better. Uh,
Mm,
so definitely listening to people's experiences. I've also came across some um, differences in how people bid in
mm,
different regions, how
mm.
they call things. So very important to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Same language
Yes.
in lots of different ways. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm,
So that's also quite important, and the relationship you have locally with your clients on that basis, and the local sales teams or the local expert teams as
mm,
well. So I think, to be honest, I felt like I was in my element in a way when I landed, working in global organizations, etc. I have always been a passionate person about diversity and inclusion and
mm,
cultural understanding. I was even part of an international student organization when I was in university.
mm, mm.
And I always worked with people from different cultures and different
Yeah.
countries and different backgrounds. So I'm originally from Argentina, so I'm going to give that hint, and that's hence why I'm also bilingual in Spanish. But when I moved to London, that was one of the things that I absolutely loved. It was
Yeah.
working with people from all around the world. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's kind of second nature,
Yeah.
working with
Yeah.
people in different cultures, and also how things have evolved. When I used to work with people in different geographies, there was no Zoom, there was no video calls. You could have
Yeah.
a conference call with 20 people on the phone trying to guess whose accent was from where, or, who was speaking from which country, and you were forging relationships with people, which
Yeah.
I think was critical, especially
Yeah.
when you're working on bids. Everything
Yeah.
is, timed. You're always running against the clock, and I don't have
Yeah.
to say that to the people watching this video because day in
Yeah.
and day out, this is what we do. But also the time zones, being mindful of that. So how do you plan
Yeah.
to work basically following the sun and still
Yeah.
delivering maybe for a global deal?
Would you have a couple of tips maybe for them, apart from spending time to kind of to build that level of understanding? Is there anything else that you kind of think people maybe moving into that role should think about, if they're new to it?
I would say, first of all, ask lots of questions. Never assume. Never
Mm,
assume that how you see the world and what your experience is like is how everyone else works like.
yeah.
Um, so, if you're managing a team in a different country or a group of people in different countries, just sit down and go like, tell me about your world. How do you do business in your world? Come with a bit of humility, I would
Yeah.
say, if you haven't worked across geographies before.
Yeah.
Ask them about the local environment, ask them about the local regulations, anything that has a significant impact on the work that you're going to be doing. And ask them what really matters in that country. So because I've also lived in different geographies, I understand that in one place you do business over a pint maybe, and in another place you do business without any alcohol involved. Just trying to understand how people relate to their clients, how people relate with each other, and I think that'll trickle into the day-to-day work as well. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the times we assume that a specific solution that the company I'm working in or product is used in the same way in every geography, and that's not always the case. So the hot buttons or the reasons behind why a client might choose these or that might be completely different, even if it's the same deal and they're looking at utilizing very similar solutions across different geographies. So, and I've always run my bidding teams as sales teams.
Yes.
So every person in my team has a pipeline of clients that they're looking at the same way a sales team would do, or a portfolio of clients. In some cases, depending on the volume and the type of deals, in some cases I was able to split that by sector. So I had people who were more aligned to a different sector. In other cases, it was something else. It could have been a type of solution, etc. So, and you can ask probably anyone who's been in my teams. When I used to run my team meetings, it was never about, oh, this deal is landing, it's going to have 300 questions and it's due on this day. For me, that's a complete hygiene factor. For me, it's more about, okay, what's the strategy behind the client? How do we do business with them? Do we not? Who else is in there? What do we know? How are we going to avoid the tender? So it was always working with a sales team on avoiding tender stage. And that's where I think you can make a massive difference as being part of any organization. So really thinking about running the bidding function as a sales team and using a lot of the sales tools. And if you are not allowed to use some of the sales tools in your organization, which sales tools can you develop for your own team? So quite critical to understand that before you even dive into the actual tender you're looking at. And then from a marketing perspective, you talked, you just hit the nail on the head. It's the storytelling. It's what are the key messages we want to get across. We might call them themes in bidding, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we're really thinking, what are the things that are going to stand out from everyone else? How do we differentiate ourselves? How do we reach that client before, during, and after the bid? How do they think about us and perceive us, and what perceptions do they have of us? So for me, that's all my marketing, background coming into place, and also being quite creative. I've worked in different agencies. I've worked with a lot of creative people through my career. It's like, how do you bring all that creativity into a very dry, sometimes request to submit a bid on occasion in an Excel spreadsheet? So how do you look beyond that and still think, how do I make my mark visually, emotionally with that client beyond that spreadsheet?
How many of us have ended up being quite good in Excel because we've had to respond to some horrible RFPs in Excel at some point in our career.
I love training. For me, training is one of my passions. It's always been since almost just as I started working, about 25 odd years ago. And I've always done training on different things because I started my career in PR and marketing. Then I used to run media training and presentation training very early on with C-suite executives who are I was doing PR for them, and I was also training them on how should they be speaking to the media. So not very different. It's still in your key messages. What do you want to get across? How do you answer a question and put in your story forward? How do you make your interview a storytelling piece and something that is memorable? So there's so many similarities with bidding. And over the years, I've turned a lot of that and done, workshops and training sessions, whether it was for my team or other teams. So in my team, we used to, in all of my teams, I always used to run lots of training sessions and workshops to, how are we going to do better? Or how do we do, how to write better executive summaries or creative capabilities, etc. And even in some of my latest jobs, I was also running some internal training for other parts of the bank, for example. So I used to train a lot of the graduate intake into presentation and pitching, which is quite critical when they're starting out, but some of the skills that are not usually given to them. They tend to get a lot of technical training, but not a lot of the, the other part. And I've done some, presentation training, pitch training, a lot of that, because when you think about it, you put all your effort into the bid, and then you're shortlisted, you're one of 3 or one of 5 going to pitch. That's when you need to really impress the client.
So that's great. Listen, we're so excited to have you on board at SP. We know you're going to be a massive success, and I guess any clients out there, any people who want to just grab a bit of time with you, grab a bit of a coffee, virtual or not, I guess they just reach out to you on LinkedIn, and away you go.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm a problem solver. So I love talking to clients about, I have this problem. How do I fix it? What do I do? Where do I start? So I love putting the puzzle together and help them, do better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's one of the reasons why we've got you. So that passion is there. Gaby, thanks very much indeed. I'll catch you soon.